I was not a fan of Brian Michael Bendis' run on All New X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. I did a video where I got really in-depth about those comics. I'll likely reiterate some of those points, but if you want more nuance, watch that video. Also, I did a video on what I would have done to improve Avengers vs. X-Men, which Bendis' X-Men spun out of. This video will act as a sequel to my AVX video, and not the AVX we got. In my video, instead of Cyclops and his allies becoming Phoenix hosts, Hope Summers becomes the host. She tried fixing the planet, accidentally made things worse, a confrontation erupted, Doctor Strange got killed, Thor got weakened, Hope goes on the run to atone for her actions, with Cyclops and a few of his allies following her. Not Emma Frost, since she was part of Team Wolverine as per my X-Men Schism video, and not Magneto. If Scarlet Witch had opposed Cyclops using Hope in his agenda, Cyclops and his crew would come to blows with Wanda, which would put a limit to Magneto's eagerness to follow Cyclops. Magneto's already been the guy who will do what needs to be done to help his people, even if society sees him as a villain, and it didn't work. Now he's trying something different, which means casting his lot with the Avengers and the other X-Men. If you have a group of X-Men everyone considers to be villains, the obvious direction would be to put Magneto on that team, but the more interesting direction would be to go in the other way. I wasn't sure why Magneto was on Team Cyclops at this time, since he was opposed to Cyclops at the end of AVX. Did Bendis want to use Magneto? Seems like they should have had a better reason for Magneto and Cyclops to work together, other than the writer wanted to use this character in his toy box. In AVX Consequences, Cap says Cyclops' extinction team are being hunted by the government, and Magneto, Colossus, and Magic are still on the run. Psylocke and Storm turn themselves in, which explains why they're not fugitives post-AVX, but Magneto didn't break any laws. He wasn't one of the Phoenix Five. He actually went to the Avengers when things got out of hand. Namor was one of the Phoenix Five, and not long after AVX, Cap is working with Namor. These characters act in a certain way because the writers want them to. Not good writing. In my AVX video, Charles Xavier didn't die. In the context of AVX, Xavier's death felt incredibly shoehorned in. Xavier wasn't being used much, and Ben decided that as a reason to kill him off, which feels lazy. If your intention is to restart the mutant species by the end of AVX, Xavier could stick around and be another ideology for the New Mutants to follow. Wolverine has a school where kids can just be kids and not be turned into soldiers. Cyclops will do what needs to be done. Xavier could work with the government, leading a SHIELD team of mutants to keep the peace. Xavier's always preached coexistence, so he puts his money where his mouth is, trying to quell problems that arise now that everyone's more ready to hate mutants than before. Or he goes back to Genosha to continue what he and Magneto were doing before House of M. If hostilities against mutants are at an all-time high, this could be the haven they're looking for. No superheroing, that's being covered by the other X books, just rebuilding and teaching. And Xavier can still pop up in other books from time to time. Finding a new purpose for a character who no longer serves a purpose is challenging, but that's the life of a writer. I'd rather see writers work their noggins than take the lazy way out. While I don't think his death worked in the story itself, in the aftermath of Avengers vs. X-Men, the death of Xavier being a driving force could have been very interesting. It just wasn't handled very well. In AVX Consequences, Wolverine and Cyclops have a discussion about Xavier's death. Cyclops says it's not what he wanted, it was an accident, and eventually Wolverine believes him. In 4 issues, they make more headway on this conversation than any character did in 60+ issues of Bendis' X-Men. This makes me think Bendis didn't even read Consequences, because he completely ignores Wolverine and Cyclops not being okay with each other, but at least having a little bit of growth from where they were in Avengers vs. X-Men. Throughout all of Bendis' X books, every time Team Wolverine and Team Cyclops are face to face, we get, "You killed Professor X." "No, I didn't. That was the Phoenix. I'm blameless." Rinse and repeat every time they see each other. I don't have a problem with characters having disagreements with each other. That's a fundamental part of conflict, which is what makes up stories. If your story has no conflict, it's going to be a very boring story. And in the realm of superhero comics, with dozens of issues coming out every month, if you rely on external forms of conflict all the time, that's going to get boring too. So you go to character conflict, and characters who are fighting for the same cause but have disagreements about how to get there, that's interesting. But if you're interested in the integrity of these characters, they have to come into conflict without one or both of them coming across as unlikable. That ship has sailed, while also making the conflict feel real and earned. And not to be mean, but Bendis isn't very good at that. Most of AVX Consequences worked. Cyclops wanting to die, he claims to become a martyr for mutant kind, but Wolverine figures it out. He is devastated that he killed his father figure. That's solid. And him breaking out and becoming a menace in the eyes of society, it's to fix what is wrong with the world. This warden was willing for Cyclops' fellow prisoner to die so he could prosper. Cyclops was fine to rot in prison for his crimes, but he realizes he's messed things up and he has to act. That's great. And of course, Bendis ignores all of this. You could read read AVX and go into Bendis' X-Men and think Cyclops never got arrested. They go to their back and forth about Xavier's death. Cyclops tries recruiting from Wolverine's school, even though in AVX Consequences he was the Jean Grey school's biggest fan. I'd keep Cyclops' attitude towards the school he had in Consequences. I'd keep his turmoil about his part he played in the devastation the world faced in Avengers vs. X-Men. There can still be friction between the two teams whenever they meet, but it won't involve Cyclops trying to absolve himself of his crimes to make himself feel better. He agrees with whatever Team Wolvie has to say about him, but argues his presence is needed to try to clean up the mess he made. They won't like that, but since Wolverine wants his school to be a school where kids can be kids and not soldiers, none of them are prepared for the threats they will be facing. Even with the field team aligned with Wolverine, Cyclops argues they need to be more active in the daytime. Go shake hands with the Avengers. Tell the world you disapprove of Cyclops and his radicals. That will help mutants overall if the government has no reason to suspect you're in bed with the guy who nearly helped ruin the world. They're getting new Sentinel factories up right now. Better to give them no reason to send them in this direction. Cyclops will say the Avengers, their hearts are in the right place, but even with Captain America wanting to put together a new mutant-human unity squad, with how in the limelight Cap will want his team to be, they won't be able to get their hands dirty in eliminating these problems. I'd have Hope and Cyclops, obviously, Magic, who is always on the darker side since she was brought back a couple years before this run, so she'd be almost gleeful to go break stuff with the Outlaw team. I'd have Rachel Summers, who was briefly on Team Cyclops during Avengers vs. X-Men, but went back to Team Wolverine before it all went down. I'd say, while she disapproved of his trying to turn Hope into a god messiah, she did approve of him going to the mat for mutant kind when they're at their lowest point, and trying to prevent her future when, from her point of view, nobody else will. And Danger. I'm not sure how this works when a series using a character ends. Does editorial assign that character to another series, or did Peter David call dibs on Danger for all new X-Factor? Let's pretend I have free reign to use whoever I want, and I choose Danger. With Cyclops feeling crummy about pushing Hope into godhood and killing Doctor Strange and gravely wounding Thor, he wants assurances he will never go down that path again. Who better to keep him accountable than the machine programmed to defeat him? Danger had found her calling in attempting to rehabilitate the prisoners on Utopia, so maybe she would see being the Team Conscious as not being much further from what she was already doing. In the spirit of poaching a character somebody else was using post-AVX, Cable is at least a part-time member. Cable spent a lifetime preparing Hope for her role in saving the world, so for him to hop off to buy some ciggies and leave Hope was weird. Cable would want to have words with his pop when he sees how royally he messed things up. Yes, there are new mutants, but at what cost? They're more persecuted than ever thanks to the actions of a select few who thought they could take over the world and nobody would mind. Cable wouldn't have to be part of the team. He could show up to have a stern conversation with Cyclops. Hope says she wasn't prepared for what she tried to take on during AVX, so it's her fault as much, if not more, than Cyclops's. Cable takes that to mean it's his fault for not training her harder. That's not what she meant, but Cable thinks he needs to leave Hope for a while for her own good, so he can reassess his role in putting her on a path she might not have needed to go down. They can eventually reconcile, but this way you can still put Cable in his own X-Force team and keep Hope over here. When Cyclops goes to the Jean Grey school, not to deliberately recruit anybody, but to tell Wolverine his mission, some of the youngsters who were on Utopia during AVX, the ones who saw eye to eye with Cyclops, might accompany him. He tells them, no, you're safer here, but they want to help him help other mutants, so he reluctantly lets them come with him. This could play into Cyclops having a death wish for his part in AVX, and he doesn't want to bring anyone down with him, even as he's doing necessary work to help mutant kind. That would be the Uncanny X-Men. They're destroying government property, assaulting law enforcement, arresting a mutant just because they're a mutant, stuff Cyclops doesn't want dragging the X-Men's name through the mud, but stuff that does need to be done. An idea that dropped in AVX Consequences is Abigail Brand was secretly helping Magneto evade capture, and she was totally on board with Cyclops and the Extinction Team, because they are a necessary evil if the world is going to stay protected from the big threats. So Abigail could send a, hey, you didn't hear this from me, but something's going down, it needs your attention message to Cyclops and his crew every now and then. The Wolverine and the X-Men book would be about the weird school shenanigans that series had been about, plus the more public X-Men doing their thing, trying to keep things together with Cyclops unintentionally making things worse. You wouldn't need to have a lot of conversations between these groups, but when you do, it wouldn't always be the same one again and again. It could be along the lines of, Scott, we appreciate you blowing up the Sentinel factory, but did you have to allow yourselves to get photographed? Cyclops would not set up a school, though I love the idea of him using the old Weapon X headquarters as a base. Any mutant Cyclops' team rescues, they would be sent to the Jean Grey school, and when Captain America visits and says, where did these new students come from? Wolverine has to shrug and say, I don't know. I haven't even gotten into the all-new X-Men. In the comics, Beast, in an effort to guilt-trip Cyclops, goes back in time and brings the original 5 X-Men as teenagers into the present day. This doesn't do much except the 05 decide to stay until they can fix all of this, even though they don't have a plan on how to do that. You would think Beast, allegedly the smartest guy at the school, would know this is risky and could destroy the timeline. He even sees evidence he's damaged the timeline later, and then he changes his mind and decides he can do no wrong. This is basically character assassination. Here's what I would do. The original 5 X-Men are brought to the present day, but not by Beast, or at least not our Beast. Instead of seeing Beast recruit his past self and friends, we won't see that. We would start the series with Cyclops showing up to explain to Wolverine and his former friends what he and his team plan on doing. In mid-conversation, they're attacked by what appears to be the original 5 X-Men. Before our adult X-Men can get answers, their attackers are gone. Kitty or Storm might say they're maybe shapeshifters. Wolverine says no, the synths match the original X-Men. Iceman, Scott, Beast all agree, yeah, that's us. Their mannerisms, it's too good to be someone in disguise. Then we cut to the original 5 X-Men in some underground lab. They tell someone in the shadows they made the first move, but their enemies were too good. Even taken by surprise, they held their own. We see they're talking to none other than Dark Beast, the Hank McCoy from the Age of Apocalypse. He tells the Time Displays team, don't worry, this attack was meant to send them a message. You'll be able to help me stop the traitors to Charles Xavier's dream soon enough. Dark Beast was revealed to be behind Cyclops and his team's malfunctioning powers, and was trying to take down the X-Men for good before he died of something. So Dark Beast pulling the original X-Men from the past and saying the X-Men of this future are mind controlled by an evil telepath and they killed Charles Xavier, that would give these guys a more clearly defined mission statement than the vague, we need to fix all this. They want to avenge their mentor, who's not dead, but they don't know that, and they want to reclaim the flag of the X-Men from these evil pretenders. Dark Beast chose the original 5 X-Men as a moral blow to the adult X-Men. They can all feel bad when they see how far they've fallen. As for damaging the timeline, Dark Beast doesn't care what damage he does to this timeline because it's not his timeline. He may be working on a machine to hightail it to the nearest parallel dimension once the X-Men from the past have done enough damage. You wouldn't have the teen X-Men living at the Jean Grey school or at the Weapon X headquarters. They'd be living with Dark Beast, buying his lies for a while, and then they catch a news report of the Acolytes doing something, so they would need to go handle this. They might get their butts handed to them, and Dark Beast says, I know you guys meant well, but don't ever do that again. These guys are dangerous. He's really worried they'll figure out he's lying to them, which eventually they do, at which point they will want to undo the damage they've done. They go to Beast, real Beast. He works with past Beast, Tony Stark, Reed Richards to try to send them back to the past, and they're all stumped. The theory is, when you go back to the past, you're creating a diverging timeline. Sending them back won't fix anything because Beast, Scott, Iceman, they're all still here. They haven't disappeared. Their pasts haven't changed because of the new experiences these guys have had. We have 5 near duplicates of the original 5 X-Men here to stay because they have nowhere else to go. You could tie this in with the events of the Age of Ultron event, which I didn't read, but my understanding is there was a lot of time travel and messing with the past, so maybe it screwed up the chances these guys had of going home. From here, the series would deal with the stuff the comic dealt with. These guys trying to acclimate to their future. They see things they don't like. Cyclops becoming a weird cult leader. Jean Grey sorta killed a star system. Angel killed a few million people in Montana and was mind-wiped into an almost childlike being. They all try to ensure they don't become what they see. The difference is, you've already established these are not the past versions of the X-Men. You can do whatever you want with them without the audience thinking in the back of their mind, all this will have to be undone in a very unsatisfying way before these guys are sent back to the past. And you wouldn't say they're the actual past X-Men, no, they're alternate versions of them, no wait, that was a lie, they're actually the past X-Men. No, you keep them in the present for as long as you want, let them all stick together, or Warren joins adult Cyclops, Cyclops joins the Champions, Jean wants to finish her education, whatever. When editorial gets tired of these guys hanging around, you do what Cullen Bunn wanted and turn them into the new Exiles, which, why didn't they just do that? That would have been so much cooler than Baby Cable murdering his future self and surgically removing Fire Wings and sending them back without their memories. This is a huge swatch of comics to tackle, so there's a lot of plot points I've barely touched. I wouldn't have aliens try Jean Grey for a crime not only she did not commit, but also the adult Jean Grey didn't commit, since she was in hibernation at the bottom of Jamaica Bay and the Phoenix had created a body double of Jean when she destroyed the Davari. I'd skip the evil X-Men from the future led by Xavier's son. The less Xavier boning Mystique, the better. Also, if his motivation really is that he's mad that his dad is dead, that wouldn't fly in my version anyway. Cyclops wouldn't say he's got some radical idea about mutant revolution, then reveal it's just Charles Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence. It seemed like editorial wanted Bendis to line up his ending with Secret War doing a soft relaunch on the Marvel Universe. Then Cyclops dies off screen in between this run and the next era of X-Books, which that should have been a bigger deal than, by the way, Cyclops is dead. Even keeping that in mind, I still feel like this run ended weakly. With how much much this was built around ideological differences, this should have ended with everybody moving past what divided them and working together to stop a common threat. Cyclops giving a speech is fine, but that cannot be the actual ending. That is so anticlimactic, it seems like Bendis was deliberately trolling his audience. I've rambled long enough. I know my suggestions are not super detailed. You could probably find a dozen holes here, but this, I think, would make a pretty decent blueprint to build a solid run of X books. Each title would have its unique direction with its own unique cast of characters, which is something I'm always looking for when you have multiple books in a franchise running simultaneously. So that's it for today. I hope you guys liked this one, and if you did, I'll be back next week with something else. Until then, have a good one.